Good morning, everyone. My name is Ray Assis, and I'm from the Asia Pacific Mission for Migrants, and we are here again for the web interview series. With me right now is Mandeep Bela, the spokesperson of the Union Network of Migrants in New Zealand. Hello, Mandeep.
Hello, Ray. Thank you for having me.
So let's go right into the questions. First question that we have for you, Mandeep, is what is the current situation of migrants right now in New Zealand?
Well, just like around the world, migrants in New Zealand are also facing tough challenges ahead in New Zealand. Many already have or will potentially be losing jobs due to the COVID crisis. Many of the temporary visa holders are stuck overseas as well, who were while visiting their families back home, and they are unable to return at the moment due to border closures. And we are also hearing situations like where many are having to cut back on food items and also relying on support from friends because temporary visa holders in New Zealand are not eligible to receive social welfare benefits under the Social Security Act 2018. And then we also got situations like where there's a difficulty to I guess the difficulty is that there's people who are stranded in New Zealand who are unable to find support at the moment, and they're unable to go back to the country as well when they have lost the job. So it becomes really difficult for them to actually survive when they don't have any source of income, and they are unable to also go back to their home country as well. I also want to mention that there are those who are stuck overseas. They face a different challenge. Many of them currently hold a valid visa, but most of them have their visa attached to the employer. And because of the border closures, they are unable to return back. And many employers are already starting to initiate redundancy processes, which poses a different challenge because even if they have got a visa which is valid till later, let's say 2021, 2022, or 2023, if they lose that job, which is linked to their employment, their visa actually automatically becomes invalid. So they will not be able to use that visa to work or able to return back to New Zealand. So that's another challenge they are facing. To give you an example, one migrant contacted me from India a couple of days ago. He said that he recently got a 3-year visa, and he went back to India to visit his dying grandmother to actually pay his final tribute, but got stuck there because of the border closures due to COVID-19. His visa is valid till 2023, but unfortunately, now that employer is looking at terminating his employment, if that happens, that eventuates, even though his visa is valid till 2023, he will be unable to return back to New Zealand because his visa won't be valid anymore.
How has the New Zealand government been responding to these demands, these serious concerns of migrants in New Zealand, as well as those who are in their respective home countries?
Yeah, initially the government actually announced a wage subsidy, which encouraged employers to keep the employees into jobs and into the employment, and to get income support through that process. However, there was no support available for temporary migrant visa holders who have lost the job due to COVID crisis. And we constantly are putting pressure on the government to apply a section in the Social Security Act, which is a Section 64, under which it can only be initiated during epidemic management notice, for example, during COVID crisis. It can be initiated, which can allow migrants to access welfare benefits. For example, the government has recently announced that anybody who's lost the job due to COVID-19, they can access, a full-time worker can access $490 per week to get by in the meantime, whereas migrants are not eligible for that. So we are actually advocating for that. We are putting a lot of pressure through that. So and we have received support from different migrant advocates, organizations, and unions on this campaign. The government has since then announced $1 million fund through Education New Zealand, where international students can access that fund up to $1,000 each to get some support. And they have also announced support through civil defense emergency support, and they have allocated additional $30 million, which any migrant in New Zealand can access around food and accommodation. However, the difficulty is that Civil Defense Emergency Management Fund, many migrants have complained to us that they, even though the government is saying that they can provide accommodation support as well, many migrants have complained to us that that's not what they heard from that Civil Defense Emergency Management. They were told that they cannot provide any support around accommodation. They can only get some assistance for the food items, and so that's not enough for us. We think that migrants also deserve access to welfare benefits, so that they can make their choices as to where they want to spend that money, because they have also contributed to the New Zealand economy as well. They have worked hard, they paid their taxes while working in New Zealand. So we are pushing, and there's already a section of the law which can allow that to happen. And we don't understand that if they're not going to use this part of the legislation now, then when can they ever be able to use that legislation?
Maybe before you go into the actions or initiatives that your organization has been doing, maybe you can also share with us about a bit about the UNEMIG.
Yeah, so Union Network of Migrants was actually established in August 2012 as a national organization to network to assist migrants and to protect and promote rights and welfare of migrants in New Zealand. And since then, we have worked on many campaigns and achieved a lot of success in assisting migrant workers in New Zealand. So, and we are continuing to do that. And one of the biggest campaign we have been working on is the education trafficking, where a lot of young lives from the developing countries are brought into developed countries and through education agents who mislead them coming to New Zealand and promoting study as a pathway to residency, which is very difficult in the real sense. And then there were a lot of dodgy private training establishments in New Zealand, where the focus was mainly to actually bring money, actually use their cash contribution, but there was hardly a proper education provided to them. And then there were employers who were actually relying on migrant workforce to actually exploit them. So there was a big cycle going on. So we have highlighted that and we termed it as education trafficking. But in terms of our current work during COVID-19 crisis, like I mentioned before, we have initiated this campaign to apply Section 64 in the legislation which already exists, and continuing to put pressure on the government. And the government has since then actually, provided support through Civil Defense Emergency Management, and also allocated $1 million fund to Education New Zealand to assist international students. However, our campaign is still on around Section 64 of the Social Security Act. We are also requesting the government to allow visa holders who are stuck overseas to bring them back home, rather than actually focusing and considering to bring new international students to New Zealand, because this is something which we heard in the media, that the government is considering to bring new international students to New Zealand. Because if there are no jobs at the moment, and if they can't look after the migrants who are already struggling, who've been in New Zealand, some of them are stuck overseas and some of them are stranded in New Zealand, if they can't look after them, then we can only think that the only purpose to bring new international students is to bring a cash injections rather than to New Zealand, rather than actually looking after them and their well-being. So that is that. And also What we also doing at the moment is through our social media networks like Facebook, we are keeping migrants informed of the developments and how to access that existing support through CDM and Education New Zealand. And we also continue to let them know of any developments around border closures and or any other support we can provide them.
How is the situation of racism and xenophobia in New Zealand right now? Because in other countries, a lot of cases of racist attacks and and slurs, actions even committed by governments against migrants have been documented.
One thing COVID-19 has highlighted as well, not only in New Zealand but around the world, is that racism and xenophobia is real, and it exists within our society. And if you look at the social media news pages, we will see in the comment section, wherever there's a talk of the jobs or there's a talk of the infrastructure, often migrants are blamed as well. There's a lot of discrimination which goes around, and people are judged on the basis of their ethnic background, and that's quite real. And um, so even in New Zealand, and a country like New Zealand, where we feel, someone would think that there's much more equality, which is actually true, that there is, but it does not mean that New Zealand has also has been spared of the racism. We have seen racist attacks, racist slurs, whether face to face, whether through social media, and that actually put a lot of migrants under depression as well. And so that's got to stop. And I think the biggest issue is actually coming from a lot of the big personalities. For example, in New Zealand, we got a party called New Zealand First, and the whole party seems to be feeding on racism, and their vote bank is of racist people. And they continuously come out in the media and make statements against migrants, which actually makes migrants more vulnerable to racism and discrimination. And that's not acceptable in any society. We have seen what happened in America. We have seen what is happening around the world as well around racism. So these things can have a huge impact in our society. And if we don't raise our voice, it can just continue to happen, and we often try to actually send the messages that, and justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.